Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
The Story.
The next morning I woke up and I found that Dad wasn't there, and I walked into the main bedroom and Mum was lying there and she'd passed away. I've been able to help myself to some extent by getting some of the details since then. Obviously, my dad had gone to the police. This is how the story goes. My dad had gone to the police that were open 24 hours a day, and he'd handed himself in immediately.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colfax. Welcome to The Story. Well, our guest today is so enthusiastic about his faith that he regularly shares devotional material with others and encourages them to listen to Christian radio. All this even though he had an extremely troubled childhood himself. His name is Peter, and when he was nearly 13 years old, he woke up one day and found out that his dad had killed his mother. How did this impact his life, and would he ever be able to forgive his father? We'll find out the answer to these and other questions as Peter shares his remarkable story. And parents, due to the adult themes that will be discussed, today's program is not recommended for young children. Peter is chatting with Eric Scatterbo.
Peter, welcome to the program.
It's lovely to be with you, Eric. It's wonderful.
Glad to have you with us. And of course, as we just heard in the introduction, forgiveness is going to be an issue because, well, your whole childhood was just shattered at that moment that your mother was killed.
Yes, it was. I just shut down. My whole life just locked down. It's a miracle that I could actually even do schoolwork. It was very gracious of the Lord that it happened at the beginning of school holidays. Mm-hmm. And therefore I had, even though it was only 2 weeks, I had that bit of time to start to make some sort of a recovery, bounce back as a young teenage person and move on in life.
Okay, so forgiveness is going to be a reoccurring theme throughout our conversation, and we'll see how the Lord worked a miracle in your life as we continue the conversation. But first, let's go back to your childhood and tell us, what was your general impressions of growing up in your family?
Childhood for me, I was the youngest son. Mum, Dad, and my brothers, we all had church background. My dad being an elder in that church, I used to sit beside my mum and as a little boy, and more often than not, I didn't go into Sunday school. I did spend some time there, but quite often I'd sit beside my mum and I'd see my dad stand up the front of the church, being involved in the preaching and the service function. And as a little boy, my dad taught me how to punch him. The story goes, even when I was in my cot, he would teach me how to punch him. For what reason, I never have understood.
I mean, really, like punch him right in the face?
No, when I did get older and I knew that I was punching him, it used to be his big, strong arms that I used to punch. Mm. But my physical size is I'm quite big and I wear a XXX glove and only just get my hand into that. So I've got fairly big hands.
Yeah.
And I was 6 foot tall when I was leaving primary school. So my hands were nearly as big as they are now. So he did finally turn around and say, "Son, you're going to have to stop punching me because you cork the muscle in my arm." And my work, he was a very physical worker. He was a worker as a painter and decorator and builder. So he needed to be able to move his arms freely. So I finally, he asked me to stop punching him.
Yeah.
And that was okay. I didn't do it in anger. I did it because he'd taught me all my life, that Dad wanted me to punch him.
But the general impression I'm getting here is that violence and also, as you shared with me in the past, violence and guns was just a part of your childhood growing up. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. I grew up pretty hard sort of thing in that we had billy carts that we built, and we used to ride them down the footpath, across the road and down further on the footpath, with all the cars coming in and out of driveways. We played Vikings and made wooden shields and hardwood swords and hit each other with those. And
it sounds like a kind of a rough and tumble kind of a childhood.
Yeah, rough and tumble type.
Yeah.
We didn't have the pretty cubby house that some kids might have. We had an old bush lemon tree with big thorns on it and a rock garden underneath, So, and you got to remember, for me, I was the youngest. The next brother up to me was 7 years older. There was a big gap. So what he wanted to play and what I played in with him was pretty rough for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, guns for me were just a standard thing. When I was most probably 8, I was shooting an air rifle and on occasion shooting a .22 rifle. Yeah, we shot tin cans and ant nests and, once in a blue moon we'd actually shoot a pesky bird that Dad, having grown up around farms, said, well, those birds eat the crops and the farmers will be quite happy if you shoot that, so shoot that bird there. Mm-hmm. But I got to admit, these days I wouldn't even think about wanting to shoot anything.
Yeah. And so we should clarify, going back to what you shared earlier, your dad was involved in the church, but it was not an Orthodox Christian church. This was a church that was off theologically.
Yeah, but they did very much recognize that Jesus was the Son of God and that he died on the cross and he rose again, and it was his death that gives us forgiveness. The shedding of his blood was what gave us forgiveness.
Oh, so they had some things right.
Yeah, they did have some things right, and they had baptism, and they had actual classes. Like, I'm near mid-60s. That's how old I am. So I've been around different churches, and I've gained a little bit of an insight. So they actually had teaching, like numerous of the cults do. They're very heavy into their teaching, so that people get indoctrinated. Well, they had reasonable sort of teaching, even if it wasn't always on, even if it wasn't correct, they had teaching. And that was one of the things for me that was amazing. I describe it these days like if you put a fish out on a hot summer's road and left it there a few days, it always stunk to me. But when they spoke the gospel and just straight Bible and didn't contaminate it with their extra beliefs, it rang true to me. My spirit was always attuned to that. I don't understand how the Lord ever did it, because I should have just believed what all my brothers and my mum and dad, followed so diligently, but I didn't.
And you said that your dad kind of didn't want to receive the truth, or what did you say? How did you describe?
As far as I'm concerned, my biblical understanding of it is because he didn't receive a love of the truth, therefore he was handed over to a powerful delusion, which is biblical. That's how I understand the Bible. He was handed over to that delusion, and he would not. He was adamant. He was right, and anybody else was wrong.
So that was his attitude, and he was involved in your church and was an elder in the church and a leader of the boys' club.
Yep.
So from your point of view, as a kid, you're seeing your dad in a church and helping out. You would think, wow, he's a role model.
Yes, exactly. He was my role model in some respects. Yes, my brothers, he was violent towards them, and he could be violent towards society on occasion. Yeah,
so there was this whole other side. So on the one hand, a church leader, but on the other hand, violent at home?
He could be, yes. Like I can remember the day where I must have been, I don't know, maybe 10. We were locked outside the house, and Dad was inside, and he had his guns, and like when I'm talking guns, he had an ex-Army, ex-Second World War 303, military gun.
So he locked you out of the house, is that what you're saying?
He locked us out of the house.
Do you know why?
He had that gun, no, those things I never did privy to that information. I believe it was all a matter of his core beliefs led him to be succumbing to fear and deception, and in that was just created a toxic environment.
And for you personally, you were baptized at 9 years old?
Yeah, my dad and the minister baptized me.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Eric Scatterbo is chatting with Peter, who's sharing his life journey with us. We'll hear more of his story when we return.
The Story. If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. or text 0401 132 888.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Colfax and this is The Story. Our guest today is Peter, who's sharing his life journey. Before the break, he shared how he grew up in a rough and tumble kind of household where knives and guns were a normal part of life. Also, he told us about his father, who was an elder in a church whose doctrine strayed from Orthodox Christianity, while at the same time, he could be violent in their home. Now, here's more of Peter sharing about his childhood and what led up to that fateful day when his father killed his mother.
Tell us about your mother. What was your relationship with your mother like?
My mum was an absolutely amazing lady. She was so supportive. She was so loving, so understanding. She had 3 heart attacks, and I maintain that was because of the stress that my dad inflicted upon our family. Being an adult, she saw the way my brothers got treated. She experienced the treatment that she got herself. And all of that was hidden from me most of the time.
You were his favorite.
Yes, I was never beaten like my brothers were beaten.
Do you have any idea why he made an exception for you?
No. Sovereignty of God, I can only put it down to the sovereignty of God. I was always the one he treated so considerately in so many ways.
Okay, so take us to that time you and your mother and your father went to the bush when you were 13 years old.
Yep. So, school holidays had started, so we went out for a picnic. The boys' club used to go to a farm that somehow through the church there was a connection that there was an opportunity to go to this farm and use it. And it was wonderful because it had the river there on the farm. We used to camp right near that. We could go swimming and all that sort of thing. So this day, it was the very day before Mum got killed, we went out for a picnic. We drove for it would have been a good hour or more to get to this place. Went through all the farm gates and that sort of thing and camped down, went and set out the picnic by the river. And that day I even had the 22 with us. I went off, we'd had a bite of lunch and I went off up the river and let off a shot or two. And so, like I said, guns were just, they were just normal.
Did you sense any tension between your mother and father?
Not that day, not during the day. And one of the things I was going to say, for me, guns, I was taught really well, you never load the gun without you're going to shoot it. You always point the gun, even if you know it's empty, you always point it at the gun, you never at the ground, you never point it at a person, ever.
Right, basic gun safety.
Gun safety was paramount. So we weren't irresponsible, it was just a matter of guns and knives were just a natural for us. Like my brother we had a dormitory where the boys slept in our house, and on the end of the on the cupboard that made the difference between the two sides of the dormitory, there was a pegboard, and my brother had his knife collection on display there. And it wasn't just little knives. He had a samurai sword, proper one. Yeah. He had a proper full-size Bowie knife, which must have had a blade on it that was 300 millimeters long.
Wow. Yeah.
He had other daggers. He was very artistic, so he had it all laid out, as a showpiece. So, knives and guns were just normal for us.
Yeah.
They were just standard. And except for where my dad used guns to hold us outside the house, guns had always just been, as it were, recreational.
Well, you never lived in fear of them.
No.
Before.
Never.
Until that one day, for some reason you don't understand, he locked your family out of the house and was inside with the guns.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so going back to the day.
Picnic. Going back to the picnic.
Yeah.
We enjoyed the picnic. Mum's health to me was quite good, even though she was on medication. But it wasn't like a picnic in the suburban park. It was out in the bush. And so we enjoyed the day together. We got home. Mum must have been preparing dinner. It was the afternoon, and I was sitting on the lounge room floor playing with something, and I looked back at Dad, and he was sitting there looking at me with this strange look on his face. And I knew from what he'd been like with my brothers and the likes, I knew enough to not sort of muck around with it, but I didn't understand what on earth was going on.
So what was it about that look?
It was a strange look. It was just a peculiar look that I could say I've never seen before.
So that was the only thing that was out of the ordinary.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So then you
Yep.
go to sleep.
And so the next morning I woke up and I found that Dad wasn't there. And I walked into the main bedroom and Mum was lying there and she'd passed away. And of course that sends you into shock.
Oh, yeah.
You know, as a nearly a 13-year-old, you're looking at your mum going, "You're not here. What's happened?" And I got to admit, there's a cloud to some extent in the picture, but I've been able to help myself to some extent by getting some of the details since then. Obviously, my dad had gone to the police. This is how the story goes. My dad had gone to in the city, he'd gone to the police that were open 24 hours a day, and he'd handed himself in immediately. He'd done that, obviously, that early in the morning, that by then the police department had processed things. They'd gotten in touch with my brother, one of my brothers, and he'd obviously got in touch with the rest of the brothers, and my brothers and the police were my next recollection was we were sitting in the kitchen, in the dining room, and the detective was there asking a couple of questions, and it's pretty cloudy, I got to admit. The shock had really started to set in. One thing I remember is one of my brothers was disgusted with me because I got hungry, and I went and made myself something to eat. And he looked at me and said, "I don't know how you can do that." And I can remember the detective said something like, "That's just normal, so just leave him alone, just chill. I know it's not pleasant for you, but you're a lot older than him," sort of thing was the inference of, you know.
So at that point, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you had no idea why or what had happened.
No.
Why your dad all of a sudden just killed your mother.
No.
You're 13 years old. How did that impact your life?
I just shut down. I would say the focus of my brothers was shame and the trauma. We were all messed up.
Oh, understandably.
And we all struggled in our own way, being different people. But, you know, thankfully they tried to look after me the best they could. They all looked after me individually because they all lived separately. And I went from one brother to the other, living with them. There was a time where I just about became suicidal, and one of the other brothers picked up on it because he used to look after me on weekends. And he said, "Well, you come and live with me since it's not working out there." And so I went to live with him. And I finished out my junior schooling living with him. And I used to go past, on the train, I used to go past the back of a workshop. And I wondered what they did there. But I never investigated it. And then when I finished school, my brother kindly turned around and said, "Well, you've really done well considering what you've had to deal with. Have a couple of weeks off and then look for a job because we can't afford to keep you anymore. You need a job." So I looked in a paper and there was a job for 3 trade positions, all in metalwork. And I went to the place on the train and I got off at the station that I'd never gotten off at before, and I'm terrible with directions. But I managed to find myself to the front of where this place was, and met the employer, and we went through the interview. And this is another one of those critical points. He interviewed me, and when he came to the point of asking me about my parents, he was the first person outside of my family that I'd ever spoken to about it. And when I told him what had happened, he just said, "We will never tell anyone." And that was like we welded the lid down on my past, like pressure welded it, like
Yeah.
a pressure vessel that, can withstand huge pressure, but it got welded shut.
Now, if I'm understanding the situation correctly, this first employer of yours thought they were doing you a favor by saying, we won't tell anyone about what happened. So he's, in his mind, kind of protecting you from being teased or picked on for having such a background.
Absolutely.
But inadvertently, unintentionally, he sent the message to you, we just lock this away. We just never talk about this.
Yes, that's right. And I never had any counselling.
Mm-hmm.
We're going back 50-odd years now. So
you just had to kind of sort this through yourself.
Yeah, and with my brothers just being as messed up as they were, no one was any help. And I'm not judgmental about that. I'm not saying that in judgment. We couldn't help ourselves, so we couldn't help each other.
Right.
We just had to band together as well as we could and work with what we had. And they were all more hurt than I was because they'd all lived through all the violence and everything that they'd lived through before.
Yeah.
So, I'm so thankful to them that they did what they could for me.
Yeah. They did the best they could, given a very horrible situation.
Well, that was part one of Eric Scatterbo's conversation with Peter, who's sharing his life story with us. As we heard, sadly, Peter's childhood was shattered when his father killed his mother when he was nearly 13 years old. Also, he shared how he metaphorically put a lid on this incident and all the emotions attached to it, vowing to never let anyone know about it. Next time, we'll find out how the Lord begins to work in his life and lead him on a long road to healing. All that and more is coming up next time. But before we end today, I just want to highlight some verses Peter mentioned earlier regarding his father being handed over to a delusion when he rejected the truth for a lie. The Bible says, "They perish because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. For this reason, God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie, and so that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth." Sadly, this is what Peter believes happened to his father. We invite you to join us next time to hear more of Peter's story and the amazing way God works in his life. That's all coming up next time. Until then, I'm Jimmy Colfax, encouraging you to share your story with someone today.
Next time on The Story.
One day I was walking down the hill and there used to be a Presbyterian church there. And the Lord spoke to me as clear as I'm speaking to you and said, "I'm going to put you in this church." And I just about exploded. That lid on that pressure vessel came off that day at God. I was really, really intensely angry. I remember seeing how angry I was at God and so how unforgiving I was towards him that he'd let my mum die.
Peter's childhood was shattered when his father killed his mother when he was nearly 13 years old. In his trauma, Peter put a lid on all of his emotions and bottled everything up. We'll find out how the Lord begins to bring healing in his life as Peter shares more of his story next time.
The Story.
Just another way Vision is helping you look to God daily.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.